Today we're going to take a look at the process management tool from Nintex, Promapp. Now Promapp is a cloud-based process management tool that's designed for an organization to engage its line of business workers as they document, manage, and improve business process content. And what you're going to see as we go through this is that this is a very user-centric tool. And it starts off here in the home page by pointing information to the end user that's relevant to their day-to-day. And as you can see, I'm logged in right now to Promapp as a junior accountant. And this is going to point me to specific pieces of information. For example, I can see the number of processes that I'm in. I can see the number of processes that I own and manage for the business. I can see all of my personalized notifications, things related to process changes, document changes, or new processes that have been added that impact my role. I can also see my process and document browsing history and favorite processes or documents and pin them to my home page. Outside of these access points, there are two main ways that users will consume process content in Promapp, one of which is a top-down navigation. And if I go into this Process All Processes area, I can see the high-level process classification framework for my business. Now, the example that I have here is not something that would be mirrored in your business, but imagine these process groups as high-level groups that are relevant to the way that your organization structures its business processes. And a user could access process content within these groups by navigating downward through various subgroups. The way that would work is as follows. I could go into, for example, human resources. When I'm within human resources, I can see that there are 4 different subgroups here. And for example, if I wanted to go into recruitment, I could drill into that group. And within recruitment, there are 4 processes that exist here. And I can see those 4 processes and how they relate to one another in this high-level overview diagram. And from here, I can actually go down to more granular content by clicking into one of these processes. And so when I click into Advertise Position, I can see the core presentation of process content in Promapp, which is a very familiar workflow diagram layout. And here I can see process activities that are flowing between different roles organized in these horizontal swim lanes. And if I want additional detail, for example, perhaps instructions on how to perform step 3, approve the info pack, I can click into that step and I can see any associated task level detail that may give the worker any additional instructions as they're completing the process. And so that's an example of how I can sort of go top down, navigating into a particular process, going through process groups. Now, most of the time though, users are going to go right to the search bar to look for process content that's relevant for them. So for example, if I type in the keyword product into the search bar, I can see that there are various results. There are some processes that are a match and then some process groups. And so if I'm a user, I can type in a keyword search into Promapp. I see the process that's going to help answer the question that I have, and I can click right into that process. It's going to take me directly there. And this again is that core view of process information as contained in the tool. This type of layout is very familiar, and we're going to look into that in more detail here in a moment. But first, I want to draw your attention to the information down at the bottom, starting with the summary section. And this is going to be, again, a little bit of a separation in what makes Promapp different from some of the other process management tools that are out there. I can see right away that there is an actual person that is assigned ownership of this process. In fact, there are 2 people, and every process in Promapp is like this. I can see that Hannah and Henry are working together as the process expert and process owner to build and manage this process for the business. I can also see that the review date on this process is out in the future, and so I can have confidence that I'm looking at an up-to-date process. And so right away I can see that this process is up to date, it's governed, it's managed, I even know who those individuals are, and I can see a clear process objective before I begin reading through the content. In terms of the way that the process is structured, again, there are 3 basic components. The first are going to be activities. These are the boxes with the blue headers. Activities describe what takes place during the process at a particular point in time. Those activities are going to be organized in these horizontal swim lanes, which assign responsibility to different roles within the business based on who's accountable for performing the work. And then finally, that extra layer of detail. So how do we go from just a description of what is taking place, for example, preparing a detailed project plan, to actually getting instructions on how to do that? Those instructions are contained within the activity in what we call tasks. And in this case, there are 4 tasks, A through D, and I can see that those tasks are supplemented with additional information in the form of attached forms and a video. Now I could expand on this and I could attach training documentation, screenshots, links out to applications, guides, policy documents, anything that I think is going to help the end user be successful in this process. I can attach it right here within the flow of work. Additionally, I can tag any systems or any opportunities for improvement that may exist in the process design. I can also capture time and cost metrics. How long should this step take as performed according to the process design? Based on that time frame, how much should this step cost the business? These are going to be important metrics if we're concerned with continuous improvement. As I can see down at the bottom again in this cycle cost tab, when I pull this up, I have a very clear outline of how those time and cost metrics aggregate across the process. I can see the total cycle time here and the average cycle cost. We can apply an estimated annual volume to that and end up with a total estimated annual cost. Again, if we're looking towards improving our processes, which most people who are interested in process management ultimately want to develop a culture of continuous improvement, it's important to know what you're starting with. And so in Promapp, it's very easy to establish the baseline time and cost metrics for your processes. And so now I know any change I make to this process, I want this number to be reduced, and I want this time metric to be reduced. Now, creating this process content and modifying it is very simple. Again, it's very user-centric. It's different from an experience that you might have in Microsoft Visio or something like Lucidchart, really any free-form process design tool where you're dragging and dropping shapes onto a blank canvas. In Promapp, the way that we create this content is by organizing it into an outline and then letting the tool do the drawing and the organizing for you. For an example, if I wanted to insert an activity between steps 1 and 2, I'm not going to find a square activity box in a toolbox and drag it onto the map and try to create space. We're not going to do that in Promapp. It's as simple as going into the outline editor and making that change there. And so let's go in and take a look at how that would work. I'll open up the process editor and I'll select where I want to add that activity. And so let's say we want to put it between steps 1 and 2. I just click onto step 1 and press the option here to add an activity. It's going to insert this blank placeholder and push down everything else, and it's going to automatically renumber that. And so from here I can just give my activity a description and I can assign it to a particular role or responsibility. And I can add also task level detail as appropriate. Now, assuming that we're happy with this design, I can go ahead and press save. And that only took a few seconds to insert that, add in the description and some of those instruction details. And now I can go back to the process map and I can see that the visual look and feel has changed based on the edits that I made in the outline editor. Again, this is a much easier approach to process maintenance than going into a freeform design tool and having to create space on the map to visually insert that box, drag in your connectors, all of those sorts of things. This allows workers within the business who are close to where value is added, who are not everyday process professionals. They're process doers, but they don't spend their days managing processes. It allows those individuals who really have the process knowledge to actually get involved in creating and managing process content for the business. Now, if we were going to create a process like this from scratch, it's also very simple to do. And the way that we can do that is just go up to our process dropdown, select the option here to create a process, and it's going to pull up for us a list of process groups. And our job at this point is to select what group will this process live in? And for our example, I'll just put it into this test group and press select. And I need to give the process a title, and I need to assign it an owner and an expert. And I'll say Ivan and Richard will be our owner and expert. And our objective is to fill our car with gas before we're stranded. Now this is all I need to get started. So once I have this information embedded in there, I can press create, and Promapp will create a process shell. And now I can begin to add activities into my process outline and create that high-level flow. And so for this process, we'll do something very simple. Drive to the gas station as our first step. I'll assign that to the driver. Pull up to the pump, and we'll have the driver do that as well. We'll have the passenger fill the car with gas, and then we will drive home, and we'll have the driver take care of that as well. So I have 4 high-level steps or activities. I've assigned those activities to different roles within the business, and I'll go ahead and press save. And that's all I need to start creating a process map. I can jump back to this process map tab, and I can see what Promapp has rendered based on what I've entered into the outline editor. Now, of course, these activities are empty. They don't have any additional detail here, but it's very simple to go and add that detail in. So for example, go back to the edit tab, and we'll go down to this activity 3.0, and I can start to add in some of those more instructional level type details. And I'm probably missing some detail here, but hopefully you get the point. This is where we add those more granular level instructions. I went ahead and saved that. I can go back to my process map. And now if a user comes to the process, they can click into this activity and they start to see this detail built in for them. Now, if I'm in the process of building this, I can easily share this with someone in the business and they can give me their feedback on the process. An easy way to do that is to go up to this share process icon, and I can select this option to email the process. What that's going to do is generate a unique encrypted URL called a process mini mode. And from here, I can type in a user's email address, or if they're a user of Promapp, I can type in their name, select them from the drop-down list, and press add. And then give them a message to please review the process and send that off to them. That's going to give them a link and an email message to the process, letting them know that I would like their feedback. They can open the process, and then they can review it and leave their feedback with me. And perhaps they have improvement suggestions, or they're confused about something in the design, or they just want to generally leave positive feedback on the work that was done. It's easy enough for them to open this up, leave their improvement suggestions, and post that feedback into the process. Once that happens, I'll receive an email notification, and all the feedback will be collected here within the feedback tab of the process. And this can be responded to or deleted as appropriate. And so from here, I can receive that feedback and continue on with my process design. Now, one point that I want to cover related to continuous improvement is this idea of capturing a current state, making that current state as efficient as possible, and then potentially looking forward to something like process automation to really drive the efficiency up. And the way that we could do that in Promapp, I've built out a few processes for us to look at as examples, and it's this generate offer letter process, and I have 3 different versions that we'll look at quickly. Version 1.0 of this process is our current state version. It's a very manual process, quite long, and we have identified several areas of potential improvement, 3 of which are related to automation, which we'll address here in a moment. But 2 of these improvement opportunities are simply process redesign opportunities. They're not going to cost the business anything to implement. And so what I want to do is to take action on these improvement opportunities. And before we do that, I just want to make note of our cycle cost and our cycle time. You can see in our current state design, the process takes 4 hours to complete with a cycle cost of $148. We do 250 of these per year, which gives us an estimated annual cost of $37,000. This is our starting point. So any changes we make to this as we move to version 2 and then version 3, we certainly want these numbers to begin to get lower. And so if I wanted to, for example, remove these steps that are causing excess motion, and then build in a template to help with the expediting of this first activity, I can do that. And I can create a second process design. And that's what we have in this version 2.0, which is the same process, just streamlined a little bit in the way that it's designed. The changes here did not cost us anything to make. It was simply going into our process editor, designing the changes, publishing that version, and allowing Promapp to communicate this newly designed process out to all the impacted stakeholders. Now, as a result, we can see that the cycle cost and the cycle time have been decreased. So the cycle time is now down to 2.5 hours, and the cycle cost is down from $148 to $109, leaving us with an estimated annual cost of $27,000. That's a $10,000 savings over the previous version. Now, we still recognize that within this current state, there are 3 automation opportunities. And this is where things get a little bit interesting, especially for those who are a little bit more mature in their process management journey. What we can do is seek to act on these automation opportunities in a few ways. One of which I want to highlight now is the request automation feature. That's where your Promapp environment is connected to a Nintex Workflow Cloud environment. Now, the Workflow Cloud is where the actual automation components are built and published, and those are the components that will actually facilitate each unique instance of this process. And that workflow will be created based on the standard design of your process in Promapp. Now, there's an easy way to do that through this request automation feature. When I press this option, it's going to prompt me to do a couple of things. First, it's going to ask me what my workflow start event is. And in this case, I simply want to replace the PDF form that is currently in step 1 with an online digital form to easily capture information and then to begin to execute on that in the workflow. The second prompt is going to be to look at the different workflow mapping options. And this is where Promapp is reading my process and it's trying to find actions in the workflow designer that match up with the language that's built into my process. So for example, 4.0C, where we're getting a wet signature on an offer letter, Promapp is suggesting to use the get signature action in the workflow designer, which would be appropriate. Also in 5.0B, we are doing a save an item to a folder and box as a manual action. Promapp is suggesting to use the automatic action of store a file in box in the workflow designer, which again would also be appropriate. Now, if I'm happy with these, I can go ahead and press create. And what happens is Promapp will send this template to the workflow cloud, which will then develop a template for a workflow that can be configured and published. And once that's published, we would have a functioning workflow that's running in the Nintex Workflow Cloud, and it's running according to the standard that was built here in Promapp. Now, this demonstration is focusing on Promapp, so I'm not going to get into how to configure a workflow in the Workflow Cloud, but once that workflow is published, there is a secondary action that takes place back in Promapp. There's a communication that will be sent back to Promapp where your process expert and process owner will need to affirm the workflow changes and how that impacts the design of their process. And so, for example, what that might look like for this particular process will be represented in version 3.0, where I open this process up and I can see that visually right away a couple things look different. Steps 3 and 5 are colored with this orange header, and that means that those steps are autonomously handled through automation. Additionally, if I were to click into some of these other steps, I can see, for example, in step 2.0, that one of these tasks is an automated task. So the manager in this case would receive a notification. They would still do their review of the offer letter terms. They would still approve the offer letter terms, but the routing of that for an offer letter generation would be automated through the workflow. And so in this case, my manager can see clearly in Promapp what are the human-led actions and what are the system-supported actions. But just a quick look here at the impact to cycle cost. You can see that we now are down to 45 minutes per cycle with a total cycle cost of $33. Again, our estimated annual volume of 250 leaves us with an estimated annual cost of over $8,000. And again, this is compared to version 2, which was $27,000, and then version 1, which was $37,000. And so you can see as you're documenting your processes in Promapp, you're managing them and improving them. You can track those improvements in the form of time and cost metrics along that journey. Now, one last thing that I want to look at before we end our quick demonstration is a high-level look at process management metrics across this entire site. So we spent a lot of our time looking at individual processes, and that's important, but how do we get a high-level look at how processes are functioning as it relates to process management within this entire business? And for that look, I can just go up to the My Dashboard section. I can click on the company name, and it's going to open up the organizational process management dashboard. And here I can see the total number of processes that are mapped within Promapp. I can see the status of those processes. I can see the process views and what the trends are. I can see how many improvement suggestions we've received, how many of those improvement suggestions are yet to be responded to. And then I can see all of those metrics broken out across those high-level functional groups or value stream groups that we create within the site. So this is a great place for management or executives to get involved with process management when they're not going to be living within the details down at the process level. So that was a quick look at Nintex Promapp, which again is the process management tool from Nintex. If you have any additional questions, please go to nintex.com and request a demonstration. Have a great day.